Bear in mind, this was late 2009. I was only 10 at the time. Me, my mother, and my stepdad lived in a small town in Sweden in a big house. If you were upstairs, you could still hear talking down at the kitchen, so it wasn't that isolated. One evening when I was home alone, because my mom and stepdad were going to my grandma's house, and I asked them if I could stay home alone, because as a typical 10-year-old, I thought to myself, I was too grown up for a babysitter. After about an hour of nagging, she gave up and told me that I could stay home alone only if I kept the doors locked and never opened the door to anyone. It was really exciting for me, and I stayed up all night watching cartoons. If I remember correctly, I was watching SpongeBob in our living room and eating ice cream. After about 5 minutes eating the delicious ice cream, I was sure I heard a silent knock at the front door. I didn't think much of it and continued to watch the show. Another 5 minutes passed and I heard the knocking again, but this time it was much louder. I was frozen in fear and waited for the knocking to stop. After about 30 seconds, the knocking had stopped, and the only sound was the TV. I called my mom, and she said that she'll be home in about 20 minutes and I should go to my room and lock the door. So that's what I did. I sat in my room, and after 2 minutes I heard somebody not knocking, but banging really loudly on the front door. I was frozen in fear once again. After about 3 minutes, I could hear the door lock turn and somebody walking in the house. Somebody was in my house while I was home alone. I sat there in my room quiet, and then the TV from downstairs turned off. The footsteps were louder and it felt like it was coming towards my room. After about a couple of seconds, the steps stopped and I could hear knocking on my bedroom door and an old man say,
"Let me in. I have something for you."
I started screaming and crying for my mother, and then the man started shaking the door handle. After about 2 minutes, I heard a car outside, so I looked out the window. It was my mom. I opened the window and screamed for help. It sounded like there's somebody in the house. My stepdad quickly ran to the shed to get an axe and run up the stairs. The man quickly bolted out of the back door, and my dad ran after him into the streets. My mom called the cops after that. I'll never forget this. Thank you for reading this. A creepy man in the house. Let's not meet. When I was 14, I would spend the summer holidays away from school at home. In the small village I lived in, this meant I mainly spent my days on my own while my parents worked, just watching TV, playing The Sims, etc. My parents were generally out of the house from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. I was raised to never answer the door to strangers. However, where I liked to sit in the living room, my chair was next to the window anyway, so I could always see people who walked up the street, and they could see me too, I guess. One day I was sat in the living room watching some TV when I noticed a man walking down our street. As our street is a dead end, I normally recognize everyone who walks down it, but I had certainly never seen him before. He was tall, thin, and unshaven. He was wearing a hooded jumper with the hood up and sleeves rolled up, revealing tattoos on his arms. He was carrying a large duffel bag and looking closely at each house as he passed. As I was sat watching him, I was really in full view of him too. He started to pass our house, and when he saw me, he smiled and turned to come up our short driveway. He came up to the front door and knocked. I knew I shouldn't answer the door to someone I didn't know, but he had seen me, and at the age of 14, I was afraid of being rude to an adult, so I went to the front door and opened the door a crack. I peeked around the door and said hello. As he spoke, he pulled the duffel bag around to the front of his body and asked me if my parents were home. At this point I thought he would probably leave if I said no, but instead, He stepped towards my door and unzipped the bag.
Well, the thing is, I've just got out of prison. I want to do the right thing, you know. It's so hard to find a job, so I'm trying to sell some things,
he said. He started pulling towels, other junk out of his bag. The word prison made my heart skip a bit, and I quickly mumbled something about having no money and quickly closed the door. He stood on the step for a minute, still talking to me about being able to help. So I went upstairs and waited for him to leave, which he did. I soon settled back down to watch some TV and forgot all about my encounter. At 5 p.m., my parents came home and they took the TV, so I went up to my room. A little while later, there was another knock at the door. I came onto the landing and peered down as my mom answered. There were 2 police officers there. They asked if anyone had called at our house that day. My mom said no one had, and that was when I remembered my visitor from earlier. I came down the stairs and said that actually someone had called. Seeing I was young, the 2 police officers asked to come inside and talk to me. They asked me to describe the man and the conversation I had with him. They seemed really worried and kept telling me not to be worried and to be honest about what happened. Once I had told them what happened, they asked to speak with my parents on their own, and then they thanked me and left. I was honest when my parents were asking what was going on, because my mom later explained a few minutes after the guy came to our house, he had gone to another girl's house. She was in the shower and hadn't answered the door when he knocked. Apparently, he let himself into the house while she was showering. When he found her in the shower, he sexually assaulted her. With my description and the evidence from the girl, they tracked the guy down. It turned out he had just been released from prison from a similar attack on another girl. I never answer the door when I'm home alone now. And I also don't shower when I'm home alone. Creepy rapist. Let's not meet again. This happened to me when I was 14. I'm 25 now, but I'll feel uneasy when I think about this. I was walking home from school, which was a 10 to 15 minute walk. I decided to walk through the back streets instead of the main open road. I don't know why I decided to do this that day, but maybe I was feeling curious. As I'm walking through the houses, I notice a white van passing by. Nothing unusual, yet since a few other cars passed by as well. As I'm crossing the streets, the same white van passes by again and again. I begin to get a bit scared as I notice 2 men in it, one driving and one in the passenger seat. I walk faster and the van eventually gets out of sight. I was so excited to finally get home. There weren't any cars in my drive-in since my sister had taken my mom's car to school that day. But thankfully my mom was home. I start telling her that it felt like I was being followed by a group of men in a van. She starts to worry that they could have kidnapped me or worse. And that's when we get a knock at the door. It's a man, asking if so and so lived there. My mom tells them no and that they have the wrong house. I look outside after she shuts the door, and I see the man walking back to his car, the white van. I tell my mom that's the same van that was following me. We both look at each other, terrified. They must have thought that I was home alone, since they saw me walking home and on top of that, saw no cars in my driveway. I wonder what their intentions were, and I wonder what would have happened to me if I was really home alone. It's scary to think about. Of course, I wouldn't have opened the door if I was by myself, but the thought of almost being a victim of any kind of assault is really scary. I never took the back streets after that. Creepy guys in a van. Let's never meet again.